The Price Tower, Wright's tree on the Oklahoma prairie. Frank Lloyd Wright's Price Tower is a building built out of a contradiction. Wright spent decades arguing that the big city, the crowded forest of office towers, speculative towers, skyscrapers, was a broken model for modern life. And yet, the only skyscraper he ever completed rises not in Manhattan or Chicago, but in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, a small oil town on the prairie. It's as if Wright took the most urban building type imaginable and planted it in the least urban setting just to prove that the tower didn't have to belong to the metropolis. That's the right way to start thinking about the Price Tower. Not as Wright finally built a skyscraper, but Wright trying to invent and reinvent the skyscraper into something organic, regional, even ideological. A tower that doesn't celebrate density, but stands for independence from density. And that's why the Price Tower is so important. It shows Wright taking the skyscraper, stripping it of its commercial logic, and trying to reinvent it as an organic form, something more like a tree than a stack of rentable rectangles. The commission comes out of mid-century corporate America. Wright understood that a headquarters building is a public statement and a piece of civic theater that makes a claim about what kind of enterprise you're working within. And in Bartlesville, that claim could be made without competing directly against an established skyline. The building could become the skyline. Wright had actually been imagining a very different kind of tower for decades. He was fascinated by the idea that a tall building didn't need to be a stack of identical floors wrapped in a grid. He wanted a tower that behaved like a living thing, rooted, structured from a core, and expressive of growth rather than repetition. Price Tower is where he finally gets to explore that long obsession. The most important thing to understand is that the Price Tower is not a frame with floors in the typical skyscraper sense. Wright's concept is closer to a trunk and branch structure. The building is organized around a central, reinforced concrete core, think of it as the trunk, out of which the floors cantilever. Instead of a forest of columns marching across each floor plate, the tower projects outward from its center. This is why Wright's famous metaphor actually makes structural sense. The building is designed to be read as a tree, not a pile of boxes. And Wright makes this a provocative point. None of the exterior walls are structural. The perimeter becomes a lighter, changing skin. The core does more than hold the building up. It also organizes the plan. The Price Tower is built on a disciplined geometry, Wright's love of underlying order made explicit. Rather than relying on a 90-degree rectangle, the tower uses a 60-degree planning system, generating a series of parallelogram modules. The result is a space that is skewed, pinwheeling, angular, and often surprisingly dynamic for a tower. So, as you step inside, conceptually, the second big idea appears. The building is divided into quadrants. The same interior shafts that hold the structure also divide the tower into 4 zones, which allows Wright to mix living and working space within a single high-rise. This isn't a pure office tower, it's a mixed use, by design, decades before mixed use becomes a default developer buzzword. This is one of the building's strangest achievements. It makes an office and apartment high-rise feel like a piece of crafted architecture rather than a piece of real estate. Let's return to that point in a second, but I want to talk about the exterior construction. There's the skin, the part that you see from the outside, the part that makes the building instantly recognizable. Price Tower does not present itself as pure glass or as a clean international-style curtain wall. Wright wraps the building in an unfiltered envelope, copper louvers, tinted glass, that turns the Oklahoma light into atmosphere. You get light as a controlled material, modulated by fins, modulated by screens. The tower shimmers. It feels protective. It looks less like a rational machine and more like a lantern built from metal and sun. That skin is one of the tower's great sensations. The exterior uses 20-inch copper louvers, pre-oxidized to a blue-green patina, which shade gold-tinted window glass. It's a tower that develops texture, shadow, and a kind of atmospheric glow. The building is also enriched by stamped copper plates used as decorative fascia elements, again reinforcing Wright's idea that ornament should be integral to the fabric of the building, not pasted on. And Wright does something else here that's very consistent across his whole career. He refuses to treat ornament as an afterthought. Price Tower's surface is not blank. It's patterned. Copper is not only functional shading, it's visual identity. The building is modern, but it's not anti-decoration modern. Inside, the tower reinforces that idea of total design. Wright famously cared about the building as an environment, furnishings, built-ins, lighting effects, the feel of thresholds and rooms. Price Tower continues that impulse, especially in the spaces most closely tied to the client's identity. It's a corporate building, but it carries Wright's belief that work should happen inside architecture, and that has a presence and a dignity, not just an efficiency. Programmatically, Price Tower is also more ambitious than it first appears. It isn't simply an office building. Wright mixes uses within a single vertical object, office functions, residential units, making the tower a small community in section rather than a single-purpose machine. That mixed character is part of Wright's anti-metropolitan argument. The modern world doesn't have to separate life into isolated zones, housing in one place, work in another, culture somewhere else. A tower in his hands can contain multiple kinds of daily life while still feeling like a unified idea. So now, where do we place the Price Tower in Wright's career? It's one of the clearest examples of Wright refusing to let modernism become only one thing. If you understand modern architecture through the international style lens, the ideal tower becomes the glass box, clean, orthogonal, repeatable, morally committed to efficiency and neutrality. Price Tower is the opposite kind of tower. It is not repeatable in any easy way. It is not neutral. It is not orthogonal. It is modern as a singular artistic construction, modern as an authored object that carries a worldview. And it arrives very late. Wright is in his late 80s when the building is completed. The reason this matters is because it shows what his late career actually is. It is not a graceful winding down. It is a sustained refusal to be summarized. While mid-century culture is busy fixing modernism into a set of accepted forms, Wright is still inventing. The sharper focus here is Price Tower is Wright building a skyscraper as an anti-skyscraper, a tall building that denies the requirement of a metropolis, a vertical monument that argues for decentralization, a tree that stands alone rather than disappearing into a crowded forest. And that's why the building's location is not incidental, it's essential. A tower in Bartlesville doesn't read as a piece of urban real estate. It reads as a statement. It becomes a skyline, a landmark, because it has no rivals around it. It can perform the role Wright wanted, an upraised hand, a solitary sign of modern identity on the horizon.